The next morning, the lieutenant felt himself being gently awakened by a fisherman asking him if he was all right. The lieutenant, realizing how hungover and disheveled he must have looked, was extremely embarrassed. Forcing his mind out of its slumber, he apologized for having used the man's boat as a bed to sleep off the previous night's overindulgences. The boat's owner reassured him that it was perfectly all right, but since the lieutenant still looked a little shaken, once again asked if he needed any help. No, I'm fine, the lieutenant insisted. I had a little too much to drink last night, and had the strangest dreams you could ever imagine, with castles, a strange old man, and a falcon called Cassandra. The fisherman laughed. Must have been quite a night. What were you drinking? Wish I could remember that as well as the dream. But speaking of remembering, you don't happen to know where the bus to the military base stops around here? Couldn't be closer, soldier. Just follow the dock to the end where you'll see a small hotel. The bus stops right in front of it. The lieutenant thanked the man for all his help and started down the dock while trying to smooth the wrinkles out of his uniform. As he neared the hotel, he felt something in his jacket pocket. Reaching in, he came to a complete stop as he pulled out a small, sealed wooden box. 5 minutes earlier, he was certain that it was all a dream. But if it was a dream, where did he get the box, and what was in it? He was just about to break it open, but then, recalling Erasmus's instructions, he returned it to his pocket and continued on his way back to his unit. 3 days later, he was in the jungles of Cambodia. By this point in the war, the Communist Khmer Rouge Army, under the command of Pol Pot, had already taken control of huge areas of the country. They enforced their rule by use of unlimited fear and terror. Buildings and books, both new and ancient, were wantonly destroyed. Not only were captured Cambodian soldiers executed, but also countless innocent civilians. Men, women, and children were lined up in fields and slaughtered by being clubbed to death with a metal bar. This method was used because Pol Pot and his minions did not believe in wasting a bullet on them. Fathers were executed in front of their families, mothers in front of their children, and children of any age in front of their parents' corpses. Sometimes, the condemned were forced to dig their own graves, but more often than not, they were just left on the ground, creating acres and acres of dead bodies that would later become known as the killing fields. When once asked to give mercy to a mother and her children, Pol Pot replied, "To keep you alive is no benefit, and to destroy you is no loss." Within his very first day on patrol, the lieutenant and his platoon attacked a squad of Khmer Rouge soldiers who were executing a group of farmers. Having the element of surprise, they quickly won the small skirmish and ended up with 2 enemy prisoners whom he interrogated before having them helicoptered to a prison camp. From these prisoners, he learned that according to the Khmer Rouge's policy, it seemed that anything justified the murdering of civilians. If they were followers of any religion, kill them. If they were educated, kill them. If they were Thai, teachers, doctors, wore glasses or jewelry, kill them. Even if they believed in a form of communism different than their own, kill them. And kill did not only mean the individuals involved alone, but their family, friends, and sometimes even their entire town or village as well. But the thing that shocked him most about his prisoners was not only were they not ashamed of what they had done, but that they had been photographing every killing, including infants, as if they were truly convinced that what they were doing was so noble that it needed to be recorded for posterity. It was as if an entire population had been led by a handful of madmen into a collective insanity so surreal that it would cause any outsider to doubt their own sense, doubt whether they were awake or asleep within the clutches of a horrible nightmare. But they were awake, and the monsters within this nightmare had only just begun their conjuring. For the rest of his tour of duty, the lieutenant would witness an evil so confident it needed no mask. This was not war. This was genocide. The civilians he found dead were not killed by the collateral damage of battle, but by deliberate, calculated murder. Month after month went by as he and his troops were helicoptered to the areas where they were most needed. The fact that he and his men were making a difference kept him going. That and the talks he would have with his wife by radio every time they were back at base. He and his men knew they were not saving the world, but each life they did save counted. Every murderer he stopped not only saved a life, but made other murderers sleep a little less easy. They made other murderers know that there were men out there who would not look away, and even more importantly, would confront them. The lieutenant was 2 weeks short of completing his year on the front lines when he was ordered to take a platoon deep into the jungle near the Thai border, where there were reports of an enemy buildup. The lieutenant was a little more nervous on this patrol because several of his men were new recruits and he would have to keep an eye on them as they learned the ropes. He would have to teach them in the field how to move silently, to recognize the signs of buried landmines, tripwires, and most of all that silence in the jungle is usually a foreshadowing of an impending ambush. Intelligence had informed them that a new enemy buildup had just begun, and they would be dropped off by several Huey helicopters right after nightfall. The insertion went off perfectly, but within minutes of the last Huey departing, his platoon started taking fire from all sides. Realizing that they had been dropped right into the middle of an entire enemy regiment, he radioed his situation back to base and then started moving his division toward a pre-designated landing zone where the Hueys would extract his platoon. With his staff sergeant leading the way, the lieutenant, who usually took point, instead took the rear guard position. With mortar shells and RPGs exploding all around them, he had to keep the new recruits from freezing and becoming an easy target. Machine gun tracers glowed eerily as they clipped pieces of foliage or lodged in tree trunks with a thud. "Fire and move!" the lieutenant screamed as he yanked a frightened private who was just about to dive into a sheltering ditch. When the private still hesitated, he kicked aside some leaves at the bottom of the ditch, revealing sharpened punji sticks. "It's a trick as old as Julius Caesar. Now move!" Seeing the death he had just avoided snapped the soldier back to reality, and he started running rapidly toward the clearing where the first Huey was just touching down. One by one they piled in as the lieutenant covered their withdrawal. As he scanned the jungle, a figure appeared in his sights, but since the figure was bending over a wounded enemy soldier, he delayed pulling the trigger, thinking that he might be a medic. In that moment of hesitation, a mortar round exploded, riddling his body with shrapnel as it threw him to the ground. Raising his head, he saw that all his men were already safely airborne, except for the few on the last helicopter, which was waiting for him. Seeing that he was hit, his sergeant was about to get out to try to get him aboard. The lieutenant, knowing how badly he was wounded, knew that there was no way his sergeant could get him on board before the enemy would take out the Huey. Making eye contact with the pilot, he signaled him to take off. The pilot gunned the engines, taking the helicopter and his men safely into the sheltering arms of the night sky.